Speaking of blessed people, Princess Ventura from Urbis is going to lead us through our next session. And importantly, it's very much about reimagining Greater Western Sydney, and why wouldn't you? And unlocking the potential future development. We've got the best of the best. We've got the world's greatest step-sex in New South Wales Government joining us, Trudi Mears and Marcus Ray. Marcus is off his non-COVID sickbed to join us. I appreciate, sir, you've punched through. It's the Western Sydney way. In charge of planning, Trudi Mears in charge of transport. Joined on stage by South Western Sydney's champion of all champions, the wonderful Lindy Deitz, the CEO of the City of Campbelltown, and a woman you saw a bit about last night with that wonderful presentation of imagining a future for Penrith, a wet, dynamic future for Penrith. Jackie Vozzo from Western Sydney Lakes. Please make them all welcome as they take us through our next session.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jeff is always a difficult act to follow, but I reckon we could do that very effectively, given the star-studded panel that we have to have a conversation on a very important topic, which is about reimagining Greater Western Sydney, unlocking the opportunities for future development. So we thought we'd go through a conversation along 4 pillars, open to more pillars if you're interested in one. One, just to understand what are some examples of the phenomenal opportunities in Greater Western Sydney? What role can land, planning, transport infrastructure play in unlocking and further leveraging those opportunities? Thirdly, what can we do differently to be even better? To get even better outcomes for people and communities in Greater Western Sydney. And of course, the last one on how do we unlock the power of the private sector? How do we unlock and capitalize on the dollars that the private sector has at its disposal? So we might start with understanding what the key opportunities are and priorities for Greater Western Sydney and what outcomes we can expect those opportunities can unlock. So we might start with that question with Lindy and with Jackie.
Okay, so I'll start. For anyone in the room last night, we showed a video which is the new branded Western Sydney Lakes, and I'm going to be selfish and say, as an opportunity in Greater Western Sydney, nothing excites me more than to be able to unveil and invite the community into the destination that is and will be spectacular, and that is Western Sydney Lakes. It is 2,000 hectares worth of land. Of that, 1,300 odd hectares of that will be lake and parkland to be dedicated to state government. And that is purely to serve the recreational needs of Greater Western Sydney and invite our eastern colleagues to come over and enjoy the spectacular features that we will be able to celebrate in lake beaches. And you can do a lot of things on a lake beach that you can't do in a wave beach. Not only will there be recreational opportunities, but we've got a great opportunity to create a city in a park from the ground up, with all the great things that, as Jeff said, are now fait accompli in the developments which come before us, like sustainability and circular economy and recycled water. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to really create something magical in Western Sydney that will provide job opportunities. And when we talk about job opportunities, the vision that you saw last night was an 80-hectare slice of a 330 consolidated urban area. From a job generation point of view, that creates 5,000 direct jobs and 10,000 indirect jobs, and you have a pipeline of another 270-odd hectares to release. So in terms of an opportunity in Western Sydney, I think the lakes are primed and ready to go. It's had its 40-year history. I'm not sure how many times this thing has been announced, but hopefully we're on our way to unlocking it very, very soon.
Very exciting. Lindy?
Look, I think quite simply Western Sydney's opportunity lies in its land holdings. I think that particularly in the Western Parkland City, there is enormous opportunity to have employment generation and investment in transport infrastructure, which will make a significant difference. So for me, the opportunity that stands out in Western Sydney is those opportunity of using those land holdings in a very wise and considered way.
Yeah, thank you, Lindy and Jackie. Marcus, to you, and glad to see that you're feeling better today. You're looking better today as well.
Can I just comment? Finally, the gender balance is right. Don't you think, everyone?
I have to say, the first panel that I've ever been, conversation I've been part of where there are more women in the panel than men, and the subject matter is not women in leadership. So, Marcus, having heard the phenomenal opportunities that Jackie just spoke about, and then the land opportunities that can be unlocked that Lindy spoke of, what do you think are the most potent planning lever, both at state government and local councils' disposal, to really fast track and even ump up those opportunities?
Well, look, please don't think I'm a total acolyte of Jeff, but we do need an updated region plan for the 6 cities. And one thing that I think we've learnt from last time is we need those individual city plans to be a bit more directive about where those housing and jobs are going to go. And that really is a conversation and a partnership between councils and the state government to deliver those things. So I think we need that deeper, a lot of direction in the region plan for the economic triangle. And then there are things we need to do in a partnership sort of way for infrastructure, and it's not necessarily the mega projects, although they're very important. We need to make sure land is ready for development. We've rezoned over almost 35,000 new home sites this year already, but it's important that that infrastructure is there to make them development ready. We've got the Accelerated Infrastructure Fund. Round 2 of that fund was a great example of partnering with councils. I think it was 8 councils, mainly in Western Sydney, had the benefit of that. But that $139 million of government funding unlocked about $300 million of council Section 94 funds and brought that forward. And that's sort of 10% of the bank of Section 94 funds. So I think that partnership approach is the best way forward.
Mm-hmm. And while we're on planning, Marcus, we might pick up a question from the audience. Question of what's being done at planning to ensure minimum levels of access to green space for new and growing suburbs in the region.
Look, and this is a critical thing because we want the places in Western Sydney to be great places. So, of course, the Premier talked about West Invest. We're all eagerly awaiting the outcomes of that and the $5 billion of projects that's going to fund. But recently we have the Public Spaces Legacy Fund, a $250 million fund, which is funding not only in Western Sydney but throughout the state. And the idea is to ensure that we get those quality public spaces that are within 10 minutes of people. And so, that, again, we've got a range of other programs there. We have to concentrate on those. Also, we can't forget those livability issues and the livability and amenity requirements for great communities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Marcus. And Trudi, we might turn to you in terms of transport. How can transport further support and facilitate those phenomenal opportunities in the region?
Thanks, Princess. So, of course, everyone wants transport infrastructure. Everyone would like new everything, and we would love to deliver it. But Pete Regan mentioned earlier, we need to prioritise and we need to look at where investment can be made. I think the other opportunity, though, is leveraging the existing transport services. So let's use what we've got in the short term and let's look at making that better and more accessible for Western Sydney in particular. while we keep on the future growth of transport infrastructure. And if I can give you a quick example, I think Greater Cities Commission led a planning session, Lindy, with your council and Wallandilly and Camden, and a very good point was made by you, which was what is the helicopter multimodal view? And that is absolutely what we want to do at Transport. We want to make sure we bring all of the transport infrastructure opportunities, including active transport, cycleways, walking. How can we get people there, first mile, last mile, and give you a view of that so that you can plan.
Okay. Land. Land is the other thing that government has at its disposal to leverage. We'll start with Lindy, given that she mentioned that already, that land abounds in the region. Lindy, I know there are examples on how we can leverage land to further development in the region. Can you tell us of what's happening in Campbelltown on this?
Yeah, look, absolutely. In Campbelltown, we have 5 hectares of land that is all government owned, local government and state government combined. It's right in the centre of Campbelltown City. We've been working for 2 years with both state and federal government on, we've spent $2.2 million master planning a community and justice precinct. Now that's a city shaping opportunity. It's very important that we get some government-led jobs. In Sydney CBD, there is, for every additional 9 people, there is 1 public administration job developed. In the Western Parkland City, that is 1 to 58.
Wow.
Parramatta's 1 to 10. So you can see that inequity in investment of jobs, and local employment is really critical if we're going to assist with the transport crisis. We've got to get people off the roads. And in Western Sydney, we're completely car dependent, and that has a significant impact on people's lives from every level, whether it's health, whether it's family time, whether it's mental health. It has a significant impact on it. So we're basically at the point with our project of the community and justice precinct, just waiting for the capital investment by government. But as was said earlier, until you actually get a hole in the ground, you're not going to attract the investment. But it's absolutely ready to go. So if anyone's got any influence on the Attorney General, please make sure that he funds the capital investment, because the work's all done.
Or if we have volunteers to start digging that hole, maybe, so people know that something's happening in Campbelltown. We should put money there. So something that you spoke about is probably linked to, we might pick up one of the questions on Slido, Lindy, on jobs. Obviously that requires as well some human capital. So maybe I'll post that question to you as a follow-up question on what do we have to do to increase human capital in Western Sydney to support the great developments, such as increased migration?
It's got to be employment-led. You've got to actually invest in creating employment opportunities for local people. We talk a lot famously about the 30-minute city. That cannot be realised in the Western Parkland City at this moment in time. We can't even access our own Western Sydney Airport. So until we talk about prioritisation of transport infrastructure, without that transport infrastructure investment, people and communities and the growth that we are experiencing, we're creating isolated communities that are getting further and further isolated. So it's really critical to enable both jobs plus the transport infrastructure to enable, because people, because they're so car dependent, they're having to spend a lot of money in vehicle investment, and they're already behind the ballpark in income. So we're further disadvantaging disadvantaged people. So it's really important for the health and welfare of communities that those two things are addressed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the world is changing so much that there's a lot of ongoing education that needs to happen and ongoing training, and we need to reinvent ourselves as we stay in the labor market, and agree that, you know, opportunity to those economic jobs are really critical. We might go to Jackie on views on how we can leverage government land to improve outcomes?
I think it's part of the broader question, to be honest with you, on how do we leverage government, full stop. Certainly in Western Sydney we have, and Chris Minns spoke to it last night, we have 5 ministers, we have 13 agencies, and we have to work through that entire planning process before we can get an outcome in Western Sydney. And we're not going to get any capital investment, and we're not going to be able to get there unless we streamline that process. And we actually have, an integrated planning transport system that will provide a decision, and a decision quickly. Everybody's gone through this process in this room, I am sure, and I think everybody, I hope, would agree that even a fast no is a lot better than a long drawn-out yes. And I think it's about, working together to streamline the process and to really come up with a way to collaborate quickly, to get decisions, to enable capital investment, and to sort of move on. And I hope that's not too controversial, but we've got to get on with it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone will disagree with you that faster is better than slower. That's a really nice transition, I think, to go back to Marcus and talk about how do we do things faster, how do we do things better. Perhaps, Marcus, about your experience with the department working with Tahi, we might want to hear about that, of how that collaboration is going to deliver better outcomes on housing.
Yes, Princess. Well, Alison did mention it. So obviously Tahi are running their affordable housing pilot, and I think that's an exciting thing, and the department's really keen to support it. So in that particular case, we're out for public comment now, seeking views about giving them a state significant pathway there. And we've done a lot of work during the year for things like build to rent and affordable housing, with changes to the housing state policy. And last year we did changes for seniors living, and we're seeing a range of different applications now come in, particularly in relation to seniors living, and also more recently in relation to build to rent. I think affordable housing is the area that we really have to concentrate on now to try and speed things up. In the broader sense, though, it really does mean that agencies have to work together, and I know that Trudi and I, in this year, since we've been in our respective new positions, have been working hard to crack that nut of being able to give people a yes or a no, particularly where the transport infrastructure is one of the critical determinants. And we know that that's something that everybody wants, and certainly that's been a focus of our 2 agencies, to try and get a very standardised approach to what modelling we need, so that we can say to people, this is what you need, you give us the work, and then we can make a decision. And Trudi can speak for herself on this, but it's a process that we know we've got to keep on with, because we want it to be a success. I agree totally with Jackie. I'd like it to be a fast yes or a fast no.
We might pick up then another question from the audience for you, Marcus, on what inspiration and input does the department take from the 6 cities plan?
Well, we work really closely, and we are working really closely with the Greater Cities Commission. It's so important that we do, because ultimately we're the planning agency that has to implement a lot of their work on the ground. And I know it's also the case with transport and with infrastructure. Bringing all the agencies together through the plan is fundamentally important. But of course, it's so important that we get that high-level strategic plan, because we can't grow in every different direction at once. We all know that infrastructure costs a lot of money. We must be focused. We must have sequencing, and so it's really important. So of course I'm inspired. Was inspired by Jeff's conversation with us today.
Thank you. And then we might go back to Trudi on a question from the floor on how important is the Sydney Metro south extension to MacArthur region. 600,000 residents will call Campbelltown, Camden, and Wollondilly home by 2036.
Well, I'd like to take Lindy into ERC with me when I'm asking for infrastructure. I think for the southwest, the passion is palpable. So it is really important, but it is one part of a big system. So I know the southwest is screaming out for connections, whether it be a bus connection or a further southwest rail connection. So Metro is an addition to our infrastructure plan that really allows us to make big changes as it comes online. So I was saying to Pete a little earlier, 2024 is transformational for us. We will see parts of Metro unlocked that will allow us to change other heavy rail services, that will increase access and improve equity. So it is very important.
And while we're on that theme of infrastructure, we might pick up that question that's directed to you, Lindy, on Campbelltown and Southwest are an amazing opportunity to build exemplar new communities, but infrastructure dollars seem to be missing. How do we do this better?
Look, from my perspective, we need to base our decision making on the data that's in front of us. The southwest of Macarthur is the fastest growing region in Australia. If you don't match the infrastructure dollars to that, then all you're doing is penalising and disadvantaging those communities who are willingly taking on, or sometimes not willingly, but taking on the growth. So we're providing all the housing and we've got great opportunities to provide a whole lot more. But the reluctance is the fact that we're isolating communities and we're not enhancing their quality of life at all. We've seen in some of our surrounding areas where the domestic violence rates are actually increasing because of the pressure and the stress on families. So you've got to look at it holistically. It's not black and white, and it does take that cross-government approach. You can't just do transport planning or planning separately. It all has to be done together, which is why I often talk about that helicopter look at what impact we're having on a region and what are the important priorities to further enhance it. But the decision making has to be not made on the basis of politics. It's got to be made on the basis of just the raw data that is so self-evident in front of us. I'm an economist, so I always have a soft spot for evidence-based decision-making. Infrastructure conversation seems to get people riled up. There's another question here that we might pick up for Marcus. Will DPE consider alternative funding strategies for early delivery of infrastructure in the context of a broader tax as opposed to local and state contributions?
Well, look, obviously that's a matter for government, and we've already had comment here today about not getting a contribution from the uplift around the North West Rail link. So what I would say is clearly, if we're focusing on delivering that infrastructure to make that Lindy talked about, to make new communities, livable, to make sure that they've got the right services. I have to give a plug for the infrastructure contributions reform and the regional infrastructure contribution, because just in the same way as the Accelerated Infrastructure Fund unlocks Council Section 94 contributions, the Regional Infrastructure Fund would unlock state government contributions from state agencies from their asset management plans. And so, again, that would be a wonderful way to ensure the delivery of the infrastructure. As Lindy says, it's not just about infrastructure, though. Government needs to be able to provide the right services in those communities at the right time and deal with those things. So it is an effort of coordination that's really important. But as to the ultimate form of things, these things obviously go up to government from time to time, and we all provide advice on them. But governments then make a decision about how they will do that funding.
This is like juggling, which I'm not a very good juggler, but the questions just keep coming. So this is one, we might take the next one and we'll open it up. Who wants to pick this one up on affordable housing? There's a focus on affordable housing, rightly so. Is it time to discuss affordable housing workspace enabling creation of high-value jobs in innovative business?
Yes.
There you go. You heard it here. We can move then to the next question. A shift to more active transport is a priority for health, well-being, climate, and economy. Why then do we hear so little about these transformational projects? We might turn to you.
I can take that if you're happy for me to.
Yeah.
So we are very focused, as is Minister Stokes, on active transport in transport. I think some people maybe aren't sure what it is: cycling, walking, getting around your suburb and your area more easily. But it truly is a connection to our transport system. So there's a lot of work that we're doing to enable bike lockers, for example, being quite tactical, and facilities that allow people to get to their mode of transport easily. We have set up a Cities and Active Transport division with the Deputy Secretary in transport, so it is definitely a focus. I think West Invest will, fingers crossed, see a lot of active transport opportunities for the LGAs involved in that. So there's a lot going on. It is definitely integrated in all of our development work that we do for transport infrastructure, and maybe watch this space. Hopefully more information will come out soon.
Great. This one we might pose to Lindy or Jackie if one of you wants to pick this one up, which is, it's gone away, it seems like. It's gone away on the screen. Anyway, don't know, something is weird with this. I was going to read it and then it went away. So we might go to a different question, but maybe we'll start with the two of you, which is about doing things differently. Ideas on how do we need to start doing things differently so that we start to address that East-West divide, whether it be access to jobs, Lindy, that you're very vocal about today, rightly so, or amenities or health and educational outcomes. What do we need to do differently going forward?
So I think it comes back to streamlining the system, to be honest with you. And I think it comes back to comments that we've all made, which is we can no longer divorce planning from transport.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be under the same umbrella, and they need to be considered in all planning decisions right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably my answer to that question, Lindy.
Look, I think it's about looking at the potential and opportunities that are available to create really livable places for people to live. And I think Western Sydney just screams of it. We have such a point of difference. It shouldn't be a competition between East and West. What East has, West doesn't have. But what West has, East doesn't have. So the absolute natural beauty, we need to celebrate that more and capitalise on it and ensure that people understand that it's all part of Sydney. But absolutely celebrate what we have and focus on that as an opportunity rather than seeing it as something less or. So I think it's really critical that it's just the way we think about things. And I think Western Sydney screams out for infrastructure because sometimes cities have been really, they've happened so fast, they've been really poorly designed. And Campbelltown's an example of that. We have a fantastic rail line that runs through the middle of our city, but the suburbs are all spread out and people have got to get down to that public transport vein. And that's very challenging, and that's where some of the active transport opportunities are fantastic that we've capitalised on through West Invest. But it's very challenging. It's a very challenging issue, but I think that's some of the things we do need to do differently.
And could I just jump in there? I think it's really important. I think, Lindy, you're absolutely right. There are special qualities in Western Sydney, and when we're planning for them, we need to respect those. And it's different to what happens in Eastern Sydney. So we can't start from sameness to sameness. And I think it's really important to recognise that, you know, the urban heat canopy issues, the tree canopy, urban heat island effect, all those sort of things, we need to plan for those. We need to ensure that the spaces that we create don't destroy what's there. I just want to do a shout out, if you don't mind, to Alex O'Mara, who's here today, who put a lot of work into the department's Connecting to Country framework that helps us ensure that when we are designing for new places, and particularly in Western Sydney, because that's where a lot of them are, that we really do focus on the knowledge and experience of Aboriginal people, and that we don't lose that when we are designing for new places. So I think that's really important.
Can I just add one other point, which is really what Jeff said earlier, that we are operating in a deficit environment. So Hawkesbury and Nepean Valley, there is so much infrastructure that we could put in there, plus we've got the overlay of the flood reports and the different urban design changes we'll have to make as a result of that. And that is a different approach that we need to take compared to what we'll do at the new airport, for example. So the airport's great. We can put processes in and have everyone working together and make sure we all know what's going on and build together. But I think we need to acknowledge the deficit areas and what we need to do about those.
And can I just make one comment to Trudi's comment, which is I think from a private enterprise point of view, everybody understands that there is a lot going on, particularly in the Hawkesbury-Nepean Basin with all the different reports and flood studies. But I think what we want to see come out of this very quickly from a private enterprise point of view is an ability to pivot, make decisions and understand the direction and move on. You know, the reports are there. We know we need to change things. Let's figure out what those changes are and let's get on with it, rather than talk about the reports for the next 5 years and do nothing.
And while you have the mic, we might pick up one question that I know made me smile, and there's a few likes on it. What happened to the Penrith Lakes Film Studio? And when are we bringing Martin Scorsese to Western Sydney?
Yeah, so the film studio is very much still there, don't get me wrong. It is in planning and it's being assessed and considered. And hopefully there'll be, news on that shortly. In terms of...
No pressure.
No pressure. I'm not putting any pressure on for fast decision making at all on this panel. In terms of where we are from an investment point of view, we're out there in a closed EOI process right now, and we're talking with a few different parties in relation to the investment and who will come in and assist with us in terms of taking that forward. So very real, it's alive, and hopefully there's good news to come.
And any time frame on when Martin is going to be in Western Sydney?
Should I throw that to you, Marcus?
You're his agent, Marcus, in your downtime?
Depending on the answer, do I get 10%?
Then we might shift gears and go back to Lindy on a question on Campbelltown. Close to 10% of Campbelltown's entire housing stock is social housing. What opportunities do you see this presenting for future communities as it redevelops?
Look, our percentages never change with redevelopment. What we work with, though, and we've been very fortunate with government investment of redevelopment of our public housing stock, and that has been highly successful. You have a look at places like Minto and they're unrecognisable to what they were. We're having the same traction happening in both Claymore and Ayres. But the reality is they're part of our demographic and they're an important part of our community. And I think for us, it's really critical, and it's something I'm pretty passionate about, is not leaving anybody behind. I sit and listen to people talking all the time about all this amazing technology innovation. We have 17% of our community that have access to no technology or devices. And they're probably our most vulnerable. So again, it's really important that when we're looking at an issue, we're looking at it very holistically and understanding what we're actually dealing with, because COVID demonstrated to us that they were the people that were being left behind and they were the most vulnerable because they couldn't even access vaccinations. So it's really critically important that we think about it. We love our community, we love our demographic. We have one of the largest Aboriginal populations, and we celebrate that. Like our community and justice precinct is based totally on our Aboriginal foundations. But I think the redevelopments have been not without their challenges, but hugely successful in terms of improving people's sense of self. And I think that people's perceptions of a place really impact investment development. And it's really important that we educate and inform people how amazing we are.
And so just on that topic, maybe I'll open this up to the four of you on leaving behind, people getting left behind. What do we need to do differently? Is there something we can do better so that we don't leave people behind, or we leave less people behind?
Well, we do need to tackle housing affordability. I mean, that is a fundamental issue for us all, and and I think the framework there might be there for the first time. The opportunity might be there, really, with the Commonwealth's National Housing Accord. The idea of 1 million houses over 5 years is a terrific opportunity. But it does mean that the housing targets across the 6 cities will have to increase by about 1/3 over what we're proposing now. But also, obviously, affordable housing, and there's been a lot of movement in the last year, both from Minister Roberts, Minister Stokes, to try and facilitate more affordable housing. And we heard from Jeff Roberts just a little while ago about how important that was.
All right. And just to the audience, we've got 4 minutes left. So if you have any last burning questions, please do enter them on Slido. We might pick up one again from the audience. We talk about daily great migration for work, but there's also for nightlife. In lieu of late night transport, how do we promote development of local music and nighttime hubs?
Well, that's not going to happen for us while people are spending 3 to 4 hours a day commuting. They come home, they're exhausted, and they've got to deal with their families. So my answer to that is give us more government-led jobs, because it's absolutely going to make a difference. The Premier said it himself this morning. The thing that made Parramatta a success was government investment, and that's the only thing that we're going to turn around. So it's too early days for us to be talking about nightlife. We actually need to get local employment and transport connections so people can actually be at home to do that.
Yeah, that resonates with me. This time of the year, I'm too tired to go out after dark. I don't know about the others. Marcus?
Princess, don't give up so soon. I might put Trudi on the spot here, and if you don't know, I do apologise. But I thought the data was that although people weren't coming into the city on sort of Mondays and Fridays, there was a spike in the transport data as people sort of came in for the evening festivities from about 3 o'clock onwards. So, it is really important that we continue to facilitate all of that. And I know the department's working with Inner West Council on their nightlife precincts.
Yeah, though it is slightly different for Western Sydney. So I had a quick look at Penrith and Campbelltown data before coming up here, and patronage on rail and public transport has increased about 17% in both in the last year, but it's still way below what we see in the CBD. It's sitting under 60%. We're up around 75% elsewhere. So I think you've probably got work from home, definitely, but there are also people who are still jumping in the car. And I think Michael mentioned earlier, there has to be a shift for us for affordability and to really optimise the use of public transport, that we get people out of those cars. The comment I would make also about the opportunities to activate local communities, there are a lot of innovations in place. The 24-hour commissioner, even if it's not nightlife, I think there are good opportunities for local government areas to work with both private and state government in how we can help you with activations and get more local businesses involved in that as well.
Okay, and with a little over a minute left, we might pick up the question in there about culture. That seems to have gone away again. All right. So we might end then with this last question, maybe for everyone. On partnering with the private sector, we're going to be, whoever wins in March, they're going to be facing really tough fiscal situation where there's got to be some budget repair. because Australians are allergic to budget deficit. I still don't understand why. The budget surplus as an objective in and itself is something that Australians expect from government. So, but anyway, putting that aside, which means then that we need to leverage the private sector capital much more effectively, because there's still a lot of international funds out there looking for money or a project to park those funds in. What do we think government can do to be most effective in leveraging that private capital?
Well, one of the things is to be more accessible about government land holdings, and we've got the Government Property Index now. Private industry can have a look and see where the government land is, and can bring forward, work with the agency that's got that land to bring forward a proposal.
All right.
And from a transport perspective, the feedback I've been given is beyond the hole in the ground. How can we give confidence to industry that we are actually progressing with particular projects, so that investors are then confident to put the money down and we can progress things? So I think that's some work we need to do in transport.
To give you a really live example, we've just recently done some market sounding for our community and justice precinct with the private sector, financiers, developers, tertiary education, and they're very, very keen to invest, but they want to see government be the first mover. So we got that feedback loud and clear.
So I would echo that and say it's surety of process. So international investors find it very difficult to commit to capital in New South Wales because of the number of different agencies, the number of different ministers and the number of different steps without being a clear path to actually, commit those funds down. It's almost like they feel like they need a nod from everybody before they can, commit, and that's a lot of people. So surety of process to enable that we can really capitalise on that investment.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, help me in thanking our fabulous panel today.